This season of Recap is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. As Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm, Maurice Blackburn believes the law should serve everyone, not just those who can afford it. They've helped influence some of Australia's most important legal decisions, including equal pay for women and Indigenous workers, and helped over 500,000 Australians get the compensation they deserve. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Experience you can count on. Hello and welcome to Recap, Per Capita's research and policy podcast, where we examine inequality and unpack our latest work in our fight for a fairer Australia. We're coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, whose lands were never ceded, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. We're back from our hiatus and excited to bring you a new episode of Recap and a new season for 2024. I'm your host, Emma Dawson, and this week we'll be discussing our latest report, 1,000 Hours for Free, Ending Unpaid Placements in Social Work Education, which is a policy proposal we put together for the Australian Council of Heads of Social Work Education as part of their campaign with Students to End Placement Poverty and the Australian Services Union. And I'm delighted today to be joined by 3 people that are studying social work and have direct experience of this issue. So joining me today are Anna, May and Stevie, who are all students in social work and advocates for paid placements for students. Thank you all for taking the time to speak with us today. This project came about after the federal government's Working Futures White Paper, which came out of the Jobs and Skills Summit in 2022, and that acknowledged the issue of requiring unpaid placements in teaching and care professions, and that this was deterring students from completing or even enrolling in these courses. This is especially acute at a time when Australia is experiencing really high demand for workers in those sectors, in teaching, in healthcare, in social assistance. Social workers are really at the pointy end of this issue. And so the Australian Council of Heads of Social Work Education commissioned Per Capita to analyse various options to recompense social work students for the hours of mandatory workplace payments that at an equivalent rate to the minimum wage. So before we dive into what our research uncovered and the recommendations we have made to the federal government, I'd like us to get to know our guests a little bit better. So Stevie, can we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this campaign.
Hi everyone, my name's Stevie. I came into this campaign quite late in the piece through my professor, Christine Morley. I'm actually from Canberra and I had a bit of a yarn with Christine, and I have been liaising with her throughout the process anyway, and just putting my 2 cents in. But I did attend Parliament as well, which was a really, really great experience to advocate for students that I, like myself as a student and other students that I know as well. So I am a 4th year social work student, and I'm completing my honours at the moment as well. Should be finishing in about 2 weeks. So I have finished my placement as of last week, my final placement. So I have done my 1,000 hours for free, but definitely here to advocate for my peers who shouldn't have to.
Thanks, Stevie. Such an important issue, and it was great to meet you when we were all up in Canberra recently to talk about this issue. Anna, you were there as well. Tell us a little about your background and what got you involved in this campaign.
Yeah, that was a great experience going to Canberra, and I came to this project actually as part of my unpaid placement, which I undertook with Professor Christine Morley, who has been critical for Australia in this space. I have a little baby and I could not undertake a placement in an external organization. So she offered me to work with her in a research project in this space. And that's when I got involved. So I worked with her for 500 hours unpaid in this campaign, and she acknowledges that. And I did that as well with May, as she will tell us later. And it's been a fabulous experience and a massive learning.
Thank you, Anna. And May, a little bit about your background. Thank you.
So, as Anna said, our placements. I'm now a second year Master of Social Work student, and I undertook my first placement alongside Anna and two other people, and we started the Queensland branch of Students Against Placement Poverty as part of our placement. So we spent 500 hours with Christine and in our team getting the Queensland campaign off the ground and running. And I've, to the best of my ability, stayed on doing social media and some qualitative research and continuing to try to advocate as actively as I can for paid placements across all disciplines in this country, and also do a lot of networking with overseas paid placement cohorts as well. There's a lot of movement internationally for this cause.
Thank you, May, and thank you all. It certainly is something that's becoming quite a hot issue, not just in Australia, but internationally, because we see this really being a dominant issue in those parts of the economy that are dominated by healthcare and social support work, by women's work, essentially. Anna, starting with you, can you talk us through some of the conditions students face when they pursue a social work course? We know the requirements are to do at the moment up to 1,000 hours of unpaid placements. What does that often mean for students when they're trying to complete a degree for a job that doesn't pay that much in the long run anyway?
Well, certainly it is a massive undertaking. For me personally, it has been the biggest burden of this master that I am doing. I forgot to say that I am a master of social work student. It requires us to give up work. So you not only are working for free, you barely have capacity to do anything else, basically. And if you do it, it's at expense, basically, of your well-being, of your sleep, of your little leisure time. For me, it requires to put my baby as well in full-time daycare, which is a massive amount of money. So on top of not being earning any money, I have to spend a lot of money to have childcare for her. We have a lot of experiences from our peers who are reporting not buying food or just going with one meal a day. A friend of ours was just sleeping in her car outside her placement work to save money on petrol. So that is how far this goes. It's actually terrible.
Thank you. Stevie, we spoke a bit about this when we were in Canberra together recently. I know your own situation while you're pursuing your degree and already doing great work in the field. But there are expectations, aren't there, on students of social care, social work, social care and assistance that we don't seem to put on students in other sectors. Why do you think that is?
Personally, because the majority of social work students are women and it's a care-based field. They don't expect doctors to do the same thing, and I think that goes to show because that tends to be quite male-dominated, depending on the sector. But yeah, I believe that it is mostly that care and love and that kind of basis, which is feminine to an extent. It just goes back to women being the majority of the people who drive the social work field.
Yeah, there definitely is, as I said to the news coverage on the day of the launch of our report, there's a gender imbalance here, right? We pay typically young men to do apprenticeships in blue collar jobs, the usual trades in construction or electricians and so on. But and they'd never expect those young men to do an apprenticeship without remuneration. So the question is, why aren't we paying students for what amounts to 6 months of work? I mean, effectively 1,000 hours is 6 months full-time work in these not just important areas, but areas where we really need a lot more social workers in our society. May, you know about that demand, and what are your thoughts on what would we expect? Would we expect this if it was a traditional male trade?
No, I don't think so. And I think as well, because social work is not a capitalist profession. You know, we don't bring in money, generally speaking, in a very lucrative way, walking alongside people in life. It's not an investment type of field. It's not producing a lot of capital. And I think in our society, we don't value health and well-being, and particularly mental health care. And we don't tend to value the people on the lower rungs of society as they're deemed to be, even though they're not. We tend to value people who can bring in a lot of money and who make a lot of money. And being a care profession and being an intersectional profession where you're dissecting things like racism and ageism and sexism and all the isms, it's not a lucrative profession. It's not something that I suppose our society and politics really wants to touch and doesn't value. So from that perspective, I think it's fallen to the back end of the priority list, and we don't value well-being in our society.
That's a really important point that you make there, May. And I think one of the words I'd like to pick up on from what you said is it's not seen as something that brings a big return on investment, right? A big cash return on investment. But investing in social care workers is investing in the community, isn't it, Stevie? I can see you nodding along, and I know we were talking about this. This is an investment, isn't it, in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that primarily governments are focusing on what's happening in the now and not so much an investment in the long run, which is quite ironic when you say it like that. But, it's quite interesting in this field.
It's very interesting, and it can be depressing, Anna. I know you've experienced your own frustration. What about this campaign's giving you some cause for hope, though? Before we move on to what the options were, do you feel now the campaign's getting some momentum? Obviously, the Universities Accord, it was one of the recommendations from that report that we look into remunerating students for paid placements. How are you feeling about the general vibe of the thing as we head into the federal budget next month or later this month?
Well, definitely we have tried to make as much noise as possible. I know May, for example, has been relentless in social media, and please everyone follow SAPP Queensland QLD and SAPP, like Students Against Placement Poverty, because it's amazing what is happening there. And I have to say that during this year, we have had the opportunity to meet with senators, members of the parliament, with the Minister of Education, Jason Clare. So definitely the issue is in the politicians' field at the moment. So it is, I think what students have done in combination with some academics that have been critical in this field, like our professor Christine Morley, has this grassroots movement is I think it's going to pay off.
Well, certainly we've all been putting in that effort. So let's take a look at some of the proposals that we've put one preferred option to the government, as I said, following the recommendation from the Universities Accord report that the government should step up, the federal government, and fund payments for students on mandatory placements, that if they cannot complete that degree without doing that placement, then those hours should be remunerated. It's just a little bit of the background of what we looked at when Christine Morley and others from the Educators Association came and asked us to look at this, was effectively one thing we know, and I'll get you to reflect on this too, perhaps Stevie next, is that a large proportion of people seeking to study social work often come from communities they're wanting to work with. They are from regional communities, First Nations communities, communities that are heavily dominated by people from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And so they don't tend to have great amount of wealth to fall back on while they work for free for 6 months, for example. It really is a barrier to ensuring that the people that understand and care about their communities are able to complete that work. Stevie, did you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, well, being an Aboriginal woman, so I'm from Wirangu Mob in South Australia, and I think that is, one of the greatest assets that I have in working with people, is being Aboriginal and having that understanding, especially considering my people are, disadvantaged and overrepresented in a lot of different health inequities at the moment. So, look, I think coming from a background of being Aboriginal, it doesn't necessarily put you at a disadvantage from birth, and we know that. And so, when we have people in our field, we want to be able to make Aboriginal people have access to being a social worker and being a health worker. And when you're already starting on a back foot, it's, almost impossible for some people. So, and I think it's really, really, really important that we get people with life experience and people with diversity to be in this sector. And the only way that we're going to do that is by creating access, and that is through making placements paid.
May, I know this is something you thought about deeply in the Queensland campaign as well, is just the number of people that are dropping out of their social work degree because they can't afford to take the time to do unpaid placements. The average age of a social work student's older than your average vocational training student, right? They're around 30 years old on average. What does that mean? What are they having to give up when they're being asked to do these unpaid hours?
Sometimes you can't even give things up because there's nothing, you've already given up everything. So you have to juggle and take on board more things. The average age of, I think, a Bachelor of Social Work student is 29.3 years. And also, social work students on average have a higher rate of women, obviously. And I would wonder whether we have also a higher rate of gender diverse people as well in our cohort. We also have a higher rate of disability and a higher number of caregivers in our cohorts. And so, like for myself, I'm a single parent and I am disabled and I care for my child who is disabled. So there are other people, like we are such a diverse cohort, we all have such different experiences. And so the things that we are having to sacrifice are so variable. But I know that on a personal note and on an anecdotal note as well, we're giving up meals, we're giving up, our part-time jobs or full-time jobs or whatever you have to supplement yourself. We're giving up medical care. We are giving up our well-being. We are giving up, our homes. And, a lot of us are giving up our degrees. I personally I was about to graduate this year, but I've had to drop all but one subject because, we've been personally affected by the housing crisis. And whilst paid placements, if I had been paid for my placement, it wouldn't have fixed the housing crisis, but it would have given me about $11,000 more options than I have currently. There's also, the other side of things is that we are giving up time with our kids. and particularly if you're a disability carer or you are disabled yourself, that has a huge impact that is really immeasurable on the individual person. So there are things that we can't get back. It's not like I got a little bit behind on my this, and that's important too, but there are things, really great personal sacrifices and well-being that we will never be able to retrieve or recover because of our placements. And the way that they're set out as well, you're only able to do about 500 hours indirect placement, and the other 500 hours you have to do direct placement. So it's not really accessible for people with disabilities and caregivers, and it's not really a capability-based framework at the moment. It's a mandatory hours. So even if you are deemed capable at 250 or 500 or 750 hours, you still have to keep going until you finish the 1,000. So what it takes, it can take everything from you. We have people who've lost homes, people who aren't eating, they can't feed their kids. It will take as much from you as you have.
It's thank you for sharing that. It is quite incredible, the pressure that we put on people who are then going to ask to do some of the most difficult, complex work in society as well. Anna, just a reflection from you on what the experience has been like for you in your situation as well.
Yeah, for me, I have to say, I was lucky to do the first placement on a research project with our professor, because that gave me flexibility to breastfeed my child, have her around on a part-time basis, so I could, do work during the nights or weekends. So we were given flexibility, but that is not the norm. And now when I go into the next placement, which will happen in July, the story will be very, very different, because I won't have that flexibility. And as I said, I will have to put her in daycare 5 days a week, which is incredibly expensive. Drive, pay petrol myself or public transport if I'm lucky enough, which I don't think will be the case, to have a place that is accessible through public transport. So it is a lot, and I count myself among the lucky ones, but the pressure is enormous. I'm 41. I have caring responsibilities. I also have in-laws who need help, and it falls. It's a massive responsibility and burden put on us, and particularly women. And then after that, we are going into a field where we won't be, unfortunately, paid with massive amounts of money. So it's really unfair. It's really unfair.
Thank you, and thank you all of you for sharing your own experience. And I think just the people involved in the campaign, in Students Against Placement Poverty, and everyone I've met through this process, also incredibly dedicated to persevering, to getting through that degree and becoming a social worker, to give back to your communities. And yet we give them some of the least support of any students in our economy. So looking at some of the solutions that we examined for this paper, we were asked by the Council of Social Work Educators to look at different options, including the sort of extreme option of outlawing unpaid placements, outlawing unpaid student placements, which would have perhaps been a little less justifiable for things like lawyers doing articles and so on. So we didn't think that was the way to go. We looked at apprenticeship models where social work placement students might get a trainee wage, but one of the things that we found difficult there was, as we noted here, a lot of social work students are mature age students who already have responsibilities. They have kids to care for, they have other caring responsibilities, and they're being asked to give up paid work in order to complete these studies. And so the option that we came up with was a stipend, effectively, where we suggest an earn as you learn model, where students receive a government-funded stipend through the placement host. So the host organisation that would ordinarily host you for your unpaid placement would now receive a kind of wage subsidy payment from the federal government that they'd pass through to the student at the equivalent rate of the minimum wage. And that was something that we worked hard on with the Council of Educators. And one of the reasons we're recommending this specifically for social work students is because social work is a nationally accredited degree, and it's something that it operates nationally. It doesn't change state by state, unlike nursing and teaching, which are managed. The budgets are managed by the state government, so there'll probably be some arrangement there with the states. We've suggested that this should be something that is paid at the federal level. There are already in existence wage subsidy programs. It could be done through existing regulatory structures, and that then would mean that students are receiving payment equivalent to the minimum wage. So that was the option that we all ended up with. And I know you were in Canberra last month when we went up to present this to the Minister and to the people that are deciding the budget. So before we wrap up for today, can I just get all of your hopes on what that might look like? I'll start with you, Anna, on what you're hoping might emerge in this space.
And I hope that what you proposed, Emma, which is great, actually becomes a reality. And hopefully, I don't know if we will be lucky enough to be affected by it immediately, but at least in the next cohort of social workers, they don't have to go through the burden that we have gone in our previous generations as well.
Fairly typical of the attitude amongst this group of students. Even if it's not going to benefit me, I want it to benefit the people that come next. Stevie, how are you feeling about the campaign?
I think that's exactly where I'm coming from too, considering I've just been through basically my entire social work degree. So, but just making sure that that's happening, because it's just and it's fair and it's equitable, and that's how it really should be. And I think that's what drives us all as social workers anyway. So we're advocates of the people that we work with and work alongside, and we should be advocates for ourselves as well and our colleagues. So yeah, I think very, very excited to see what this could bring.
Thank you. And May, I'll let you finish up as the Queensland coordinator of this campaign. How are you feeling about where things stand? It's only a couple of weeks to the budget now.
Oh, the title, gives me stress. But I am hopeful. I am hopeful that the preferred option that Per Capita has put in the report, having the pre-existing infrastructure for these kinds of payments, it gives me hope that this can happen in a timely fashion, because that's one of the biggest concerns that SAP has. It has to happen fast. And personally as well, and having had a lot of people come and speak to me about it, I just think it's really important that our placements are paid in ways that don't cause further harm to already marginalised people. So people who rely upon income support payments, if we earn other money, we can lose our payments, which in the long run then means we have no income. So I think I did some calculations, and I think being a stipend, it puts you about $1,200 or so above the maximum amount being to be non-taxable for a stipend, assuming that's the person doesn't also receive any other bursaries or scholarships. So yeah, if they could be paid in a way that doesn't harm people and harm people in a long-term manner as well, I think that's really important. So, and it includes international students, which is really important as well, because that's a very under-recognised part of our cohorts that often gets left behind. So it gives me hope that we can all be paid, because our profession is really in crisis. It's getting worse, and it's harming the people that we want to help, and it's also harming us. And we need remuneration for the work that we're doing for 1,000 hours. It's a long period of time and we deserve that.
You certainly do, May. Thank you. And making that really important point that this was one of the few options we found that would include international students. And that's so critical because we know we need an extra 10,000 social workers in the next 5 years, right? Which means tripling the rate at which we're getting graduates completing their courses and or allowing more international students to complete their courses here and then settle and work here, because you can't just arrive on these shores and instantly start work as a social work student. Even if you come with qualifications from overseas, you'll be required to do that local placement. So thank you all so much, not only for joining us today and for your passion and commitment to this campaign, but for the work that you do and the work that you intend to do for our community in your life. It is not often said enough and certainly not often heard enough that the women that do the kind of work that all of you do really carry our society on your shoulders, and it's about time that we recognise that and valued your work accordingly. So thank you so much. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, May, for joining us today. That is sadly all we have time for today. I really am grateful to everyone involved in this campaign, the heads of social work, particularly the amazing Christine Morley and others that asked me to do this work. I'd like to thank our new sponsors, Morris Blackburn Lawyers, and lastly, thanks to you, all of you listeners, for joining us for this episode of Recap. We've much more content coming your way in 2024. We're a bit late to get started, but we're going to make up for it. We're really proud to have added burning platforms to our roster of podcasts. So join Peter Lewis, convener of our Centre for the Public Square, every fortnight as he and his panel there chat about the politics of big tech. Our Centre for Equitable Housing has a new series on the housing crisis, and we'll be debuting that in May as well. So look out for that one. And we're continuing to produce our live recordings of the John Cain Lunch series and our webinars. So make sure you subscribe to Per Capita, either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or YouTube. Or if you want to get all the latest news from Per Capita, just subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that at percapita.org.au. Thanks again, and join us next time when we continue to examine inequality and work towards a fairer Australia. Since we recorded this episode of Recap, we have had the welcome news that the government in the upcoming budget will be moving to make payments for student placements, including social work students. Minister Jason Clare today announced that commencing on the 1st of July 2025, students undertaking studies in nursing, teaching, midwifery and social work will receive a payment of just under $320 a week to support them while they do that essential paid placement work. It's not the full minimum wage, but it is on top of any other income support those students might be receiving, and this is a very welcome move from the government. Congratulations to all the students that we spoke to today, May, Anna and Stevie, everyone involved in the Placement Poverty campaign, and our friends at the Australian Services Union for this fantastic win.